Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Damage Report and another fantastic Monday. Coming to you with Francesca Fiorentini. Francesca, how's it going?
What's going on? I'm okay. I don't know. I feel like COVID is gonna outlast all of my plans. Forget the fall plans, just like any plans, future plans in general. Did I have plans? I had some.
Did you do one of those memes? I don't think I saw yours, but no, I thought about it for a while, but they were too nerdy. I just decided not to go there.
You know, there's only so much content we can do.
I know that's true. And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that because today is gonna be a big one for content. Not only do we have this whole episode where for the next 90 minutes or so, we're gonna be walking you through developments in Afghanistan, the authorization of the Pfizer vaccine, the assurance that no right-wingers will use it anyway, and a bunch of other political news. But then once we're done with that, we're gonna be filming our top 10 list of the week, which goes out to our tier 2, tier 3 members on YouTube. We had a viewer suggest, this is Zunatu suggested our top 10 time sinks, things we've invested way too much time into. And so that made me do a lot of looking back over the last few years, and I'm now scared about the way that I think I should be under a conservatorship, honestly. I don't think I can manage my time. And then at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, we're gonna be doing our live monthly Q&A for our tier 3 members on YouTube. So a group of us hangs out, we chit chat, I answer some questions. It's fun, we do it once a month. And so if you'd like to get access to those bits of bonus content, you can become a tier 2 or tier 3 member and get access to them. So top 10 favorite co-hosts, that's gonna put me in trouble, Kyle. I don't think I can do that.
I mean, yeah.
But someone who almost certainly is on that list is Francesca. So we're very glad to have you here.
And one of my time sinks, just a spoiler, is my podcast, The Bituation Room. And John Iderola has been the biggest friend and went ahead and bought himself a piece of Bituation Room swag. And he's wearing the shirt right now, and it looks great on you.
I didn't do it to support you. I just really like the shirt. If this was a right winger, this was Chanel Rion, I'd still be wearing it because it's a really cool shirt.
Sure, yeah, you just like you like to see a hysterical woman losing her mind. You're like, yes.
Exactly. Well, that actually probably would be popular for right wingers. They love that imagery. But anyway, it's awesome. And so where's that available?
Bituationroom.com is where you can get it. We have a bunch of different things. We got a tote bag. We got merch, and again, we're gonna be in Portland, Oregon on September 2nd for a live show, so definitely get tickets to that. Sorry, we have the news to speak of.
We do also have news, but that's awesome. Everyone go check it out. And so we're about to launch into it, but before that, if you could hit the like button or share the stream, or I don't know where you're watching this, do something. They give you some things to do. They mostly exaggerate how much it actually helps, but it's all that we have. Let's do it together. And if you want to send us any comments, tweets, super chat, stuff like that, we'll respond as we go. But we've got a lot to get to, so Francesca, you ready to do this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Me too then, let's do it. We're about 1 week into the US response to the fall of Kabul, the taking over of Afghanistan by the Taliban, and it was a very rough week. Still is, but let's touch base with how things are going. The military says it's evacuated 28,000 people since August 14th from the chaotic Afghan capital in the week since the Taliban seized control. So starting off with very few people on a daily basis, they have clearly ramped that up. And President Biden said just yesterday that his administration might extend his August 31st deadline for removing all American troops from Afghanistan. And he pledged that all evacuated Afghan allies will be given a home in the United States after they are screened and vetted at bases in other countries. So look, that's fine. I continue to hate the focus on the Afghan allies, because that, I know what that means. That's, hey, so like there's a lot of people that need help. How are we gonna draw that circle? Is it gonna be broad or is it gonna be very narrow? And everything from Joe Biden has convinced me that it is gonna be drawn quite narrowly indeed. And in the end, how much higher do we think that number is gonna go? They've got 28,000 so far. Do we think it's gonna hit 50? Is it gonna hit 100,000? I don't think if Joe Biden has much to say about it, but Things have obviously been developing. Francesca, what do you think so far?
There's a lot to talk about. I know we're going to get into it, but I mean, just out the gate, a lot of civilian organizations are demanding and asking for international solidarity. And the things that people can do around the world is to, yes, say that your country should accept refugees from Afghanistan. And I know that they are trying to get people out, and I think this is really good. But yeah, you're exactly right that there's a vetting process, et cetera. And there is a cruel twist here for who gets asylum and who doesn't. And that is who supported a 20-year occupation of their own country that resulted in massive amounts of deaths and massive amounts of displacement, people losing their livelihoods, weddings, gatherings being drone striked from the air by Americans and their allies. So what are we really talking about when it means, hey, anyone who helped the US occupation gets a free ride? That's quite cruel, right? And so I think that it is incumbent upon all of us also to look, the reality is whether you like the Taliban or not, it is important that Afghanistan succeed as a nation, that it can be a place that people can live in relative safety. So how can the Taliban actually, create that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and when you say that it has to function as a state, what is their idea of the obligations of a state to its people? What are its core functions and all that? They want to imply that they've changed, but again, we'll see. So yeah, look, they've tasked some civilian airlines with helping to get people out, which is certainly helping with those numbers. It's making the situation seem even more like a desperate Dunkirk style thing when you have the civilians being tapped for it. But I know some will say, well, you guys don't like Biden. You're holier than thou. You should just wait and see. Maybe America will be awesome. But I don't know. I'm not seeing it based on the rhetoric. It took a week for Biden to move to, in his Sunday address, kind of acknowledging that it's a tragedy at all. He had been very resistant to even do that. And that is miles away from an actual policy shift, actually prioritizing refugee resettlement. And so really takes me back to the conversations we were having about critical race theory and the right, talking about establishing education standards that get young kids to love America. We have opportunities constantly for Americans and others to love America. You love something based on the choices it makes. We could be something worthy of love and the bare minimum considering all the damage we've done there, but we could move all these people back, strengthening our country, making good on the promises we've made, both explicit and implicit, safeguarding life. We could do all of those things. We will not choose to. And so once again, we're gonna be in a position where, man, if you wanna make kids love America, you're gonna have to bash them over the head with propaganda, because they're certainly not gonna generate those feelings by watching the news, by understanding what we actually are. You better hope that ignorance will get you there, because a critical analysis of the state of our country is not gonna do it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, look, he's obviously looking out for his own behind when it comes to the right hammering him, when it comes to these neocons hammering him, when it comes to the MAGA officials who were like, oh, we would have done this better, / we believed in staying in Afghanistan. It's like, no, you didn't. You always talked about getting out of Afghanistan, right? You even started the deal to do that. But I think what is sad is that Biden could have an opportunity to say, this was not the war that I perpetuated, right? I'm not gonna be the president to do it. Instead, I'm gonna be the president to accept and welcome the people who were on the short end of this war, the people who lost everything because of this war, the people who helped us. Again, I find that problematic, but he could sort of rise above that and say it rather than well, if they're not, if they pose no threat, I guess they could come over anyway. They gotta fight for themselves, so.
Yeah,
it could be starker, but again, Biden doesn't usually draw stark lines. In fact, I've been even surprised that he's doubled down on his decision to withdraw in the first place and hasn't backtracked. I'm honestly actually pretty supportive of that. Very supportive of that.
Yeah, that's true. That would be like, I think, a worst case scenario. What we have right now is, I think, the next to worst case scenario. And honestly, like, aside from the hardcore neocons, for most on the right who've very begrudgingly, belatedly moved to the position that we shouldn't still be there, what do they have to complain about with the way Biden is handling this? I know that they will complain. That's their job. That's what they'll do. But this is what they want. He's not really expressing that much empathy for the people of Afghanistan. He's almost certainly going to keep the numbers as low as possible. This is almost the best case scenario for them. It's hardly like, well, it's indistinguishable from AOC and Ilhan Omar being joint presidents. They will pretend that that's the case, but it could not be a bigger divide. Anyway, Biden is saying that we might extend that deadline, the August 31st deadline, where all of our troops in Afghanistan will be gone. The issue is that it is now no longer just up to him, because Dr. Suhail Shaheen, a spokesperson for the Taliban, said it's a red line. President Biden announced that on 31st August, they would withdraw all their military forces. So if they extend it, that means they are extending occupation while there is no need for that. If the US or UK were to seek additional time to continue evacuations, the answer is no, or there would be consequences. It will create mistrust between us. If they are intent on continuing the occupation, it will provoke a reaction. So we have a little bit more from this representative of the Taliban, but it's not defined there, Francesca, as what that reaction or consequences would be. One can sort of speculate. So what do you think about that? Is this going to influence the calculation of whether we push back that date?
It's not up to the Taliban. Like, seriously though, seriously, the Taliban and Biden's talked about this and others have talked about the Taliban is looking for international recognition. They're looking for support. They're gonna need support. They have trouble keeping their own people in line. Big surprise, it's the Taliban, right? So you can push that deadline if you're like, oh, do you want any aid? Now, I don't advocate for military aid. I'm advocating for like actual humanitarian aid, money for infrastructure, money for whatever it is, like you can push that deadline as long as you're negotiating. And all signs point to that the Taliban wants to negotiate and they want to be taken seriously. So guess what? That's how you do it. Throwing down your red line, like fools, you just got in power. Okay, calm down with your red line.
Yeah. Well, there was another question posed to the spokesperson. When pressed on the issue of, for instance, the people clinging onto an aircraft leaving the country, saying it's far from routine during a political transition, Dr. Shaheen dismissed it as economic migration, saying, I assure you, it is not about being worried or scared. They want to reside in Western countries, and that is kind of economic migration because Afghanistan is a poor country. And 70% of the people of Afghanistan live under the line of poverty. So everyone wants to resettle in Western countries to have a prosperous life. It is not about being scared. I am obviously not an expert on what it's like to live in Afghanistan, either today or a year ago or 30 years ago. And I am sure that there is some degree of economic migration that happens. I doubt that is responsible for herds of people flooding into this airport, like literally as the regime is falling and being so desperate to get out at literally any cost that they will cling to the underside of a plane knowing that they will die as a result of that. And
it's just such a funny argument. Like he sounds like, this is where you realize that, extremists and far right, the far right in every single country are the same. They mirror one another. I mean, that sounds like a GOP talking point. Like, migrants from Central America, they're not scared for their lives. They just want to go to Disneyland. Like, what are you talking about? And when you think about it, it's like, yeah, it is for economic reasons because guess what? They're being threatened. They're let's say livestock, their money, they're being extorted. Their way of life is being threatened. If they don't, hand it over to cartels or the Taliban or whomever the case may be. So your livelihood, your survival, and your economic survival, they are the same thing for the majority of the people in this world. Sadly, I mean, until we overthrow capitalism, I mean, we're working on it here, people. But again, it's just such a funny thing it's such like a cynical and really gross thing to say.
Yeah, and it honestly reminds, like, yeah, a person from the Taliban should be saying that. I mean, after all, virtually everyone who's paid millions of dollars to opine on politics spent 20 years saying they hate us because of our freedoms. So yeah, we should have a dark mirror to that. Here's an idea. Let's not fill our governments or our media companies with a bunch of people that are effectively sociopaths, that care not at all about the actual motivations that lead to human behavior, don't care about the fates of the people of Afghanistan, honestly don't even really care that much about the fates of most of the people of America. Let's work towards getting those sorts of people out of positions of power and influence. Now, what do the people think about all this a week into the situation in Afghanistan? Well, new CBS News poll shows 63% approve of removing US troops, so still a fairly strong majority. 47% approve of Biden's handling of it in particular, though. And you can see the change in time over that. 47 to 60 approved to disapprove now. 47 and 53. Yes, back in July, he had 60% approval of the withdrawal. Of course, at that point, all that people are really responding to is that he will withdraw. They're not really responding to anything happening on the ground. Not to say that there hadn't been incidents, there had been attacks and things like that, but they weren't hearing much of that. His overall job approval rating, by the way, has dropped from 62% back in March down to 50-50 now. And so, it's impossible to say, Francesca, how much of that is an immediate thing of the Afghanistan withdrawal. It could be a combination of a lot of things, but that's certainly the biggest news of the past few weeks. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think that the media loves a narrative, you know what I mean? They love anything. Oh, the president's slipping this and that. And so, I really, really have a hard time taking seriously some of these op-eds that are like, the president is in trouble, blah. That being said, you see the stats and it's like, yeah, most people want to get out of Afghanistan, but they don't know how to do it. And I've said this before on the show, I've said it many times, there's no good way to get out of a bad war. It's not possible, right? We've learned this lesson many, many times. And my God, I really hope we don't have to learn it again in my lifetime. But I feel like we will. I feel like we will once again get into a quagmire that doesn't work, trying to nation build, trying to stop communism, trying to stop, so-called Islamic terrorism, whatever it is, and it doesn't work. So, this is the point. And yeah, you don't like how it's going down. Yeah, it sucks. They're doing what they can. There was no good way out of this. There were a lot of other worse options. This is like the worst escape room ever.
Jesus, have you seen the movies? Because that's a high bar. Yeah.
I thought it was just like a physical escape room. Those rooms that you go into that like tech companies pay for their employees to team build.
I've done many of those. Not in a long time.
Is it just like you, Jank, and Anna just like screaming at each other?
That actually sounds awesome. No, it's mostly me and Brett and Brooke. But anyway, although they've done far more than me, not with me, oddly enough. I guess my phone wasn't working. I don't know. Anyway, but that was a long time ago. The scars are still there. Okay, so we do have to take our first break though. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the pandemic, about FDA approval of vaccines, what medicine right-wingers are willing to take, and a whole bunch more after this. Okay, everyone, let's talk about some stuff before we jump into all of this. Further reminder, Tier 3 member Q&A is coming up after the show, 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. You still have time to both submit questions on the community tab, and you can do it live as well. And if you'd like to either become a Tier 3 member or upgrade your membership, you'll get access to that, as well as all the past ones. We talked about a ton of stuff. And also, as always, Indisputable is coming up immediately after the damage report, but not as always, Francesca is going to be co-hosting it.
It's a very fantastic Monday. It's just a little, maybe a little too fantastic.
Might be a bit too fantastic, actually.
You all can decide. But yes, I will be on with Dr. Rashad Ritchie. Very excited.
That'll be fun. Is this your first time?
No.
Oh, you've done it before? Okay.
First Monday though.
Awesome, well, it should be fun. Okay, with that, let's jump into other stuff. So we know that there are a lot of reasons that different groups are hesitant to take the vaccine. For some, generally right-wingers, one of the reasons you hear is it's not FDA approved. Why would I take something that's not FDA approved? And so you know where this is headed. Today, Food and Drug Administration granted full approval to Pfizer-BioNTech's coronavirus vaccine for people 16 and older, making it the first to move beyond emergency use status in the United States, which will have consequences. But before we get into those consequences, let's talk about the theoretical one, Francesca. They said, I don't trust it because it's not FDA approved. And so one would expect that now they'll take it, right?
Yeah. That's exactly what they were waiting for. That is all it's going to take. Please end this nightmare. No, these are the same people that obviously take non-FDA approved supplements that Alex Jones is hawking, different kinds of snake oil that make different parts of you supposedly get bigger. And so I don't like they don't care about FDA supplements. Like all the people, seriously, they're convinced that the entire medical establishment, that all of the canon of Western medicine has been lying to them. But if they support their favorite right-wing YouTubers smoothie blend, then they will be infused with, gorilla juice and whatever, and like withstand the apocalypse. I'm not sure. When all of the libs come at them with their pronouns, they need something to shield them from that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I know, and I understand your point because I take the smoothie now with brain juice 2000. But anyway, I don't expect that it's going to change a lot of hard right-wingers' minds, but it might make some other groups more willing to take it. As we always acknowledge, there are different groups that are hesitant for different reasons. Some of them are just BS and deserve to be pointed out. So don't come at me with all that. I almost swore right there. Anyway, with that BS, I'll just say that then, actually. Oh, by the way, I saw the initial announcement on Fox News of the approval. Now, they did in the end imply that it had not been rushed, the approval, but the anchor initially said, leading to some criticism that it had been rushed. Well, yeah, like you're talking vaguely. Tucker Carlson's gonna do a monologue tonight about how it was rushed, I guarantee. So look in the mirror there. Anyway, let's talk about more significant consequences. For instance, the decision to authorize the Pfizer vaccine will now set off a cascade of vaccine requirements by hospitals, colleges, corporations, and other organizations. For instance, United Airlines recently announced that its employees will be required to show proof of vaccination within 5 weeks of regulatory approval. Oregon has adopted a similar requirement for all state workers, as have a host of universities in states from Louisiana to Minnesota. The Pentagon has said it would mandate the shots for the country's 1.3 million active duty troops once the Pfizer approval came through. And what do the people think about this? Because this is going to be presented as highly controversial, whether it is or not. According to a USA Today Ipsos poll, 72% of Americans call mask mandates a matter of health and safety, not an infringement on personal liberty, and 61% endorsed requiring vaccinations except for those with a medical or religious exemption. And really liking Trump is not a religious thing, even if it kind of seems like it at times. So in terms of the vaccine mandates potentially coming, what do you think, Francesca?
I mean, I think it's good. Look, we know that they've gotten all of their testing and their clinical trials from a bunch of different countries that have used Pfizer. Obviously, I am curious as to why Pfizer is first. But I still think that we have to divorce, at least for now, are major and legitimate criticisms against big pharma from the necessity to save lives right now. So I think it's good. I don't know if it's actually going to change a lot of minds, but if these institutions had been waiting and holding out, which I didn't know they had been holding out for instituting that policy, that is so helpful to get things and get life and get work a little bit back to normal. We're talking about universities and hospitals and like, airlines and whatnot. So
yeah,
bless them if that's what, look, they were looking out for people. They're saying we can't institute this unless it's FDA approved. And now that it is, good for them.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll help in that way. And there's certainly gonna be people that won't be affected by any of the mandates that we're seeing here, but you have these overlapping spheres of wanting to have access to certain things for students and people traveling and all of that. That is going to affect a lot of people. And so now having a little bit more government action, having the it hasn't been FDA approved argument no longer actually work, although they'll just say it was rushed, many of them, that might get through to some more people, combined with the most persuasive thing of all, regrettably, the massively raising numbers of COVID cases and deaths, which we're gonna turn to in just a sec. But you had a question about Pfizer being first. I can't say anything about why they were first, but I can say a little bit about the process. Pfizer said it had presented the FDA with data from 44,000 clinical trial participants in the US, the European Union, Turkey, South Africa, and South America. The company said the data showed the vaccine was 91% effective in preventing infection, a slight drop from the 95% of efficacy rate that the data showed when the FDA decided to authorize the vaccine for emergency use back in December. Pfizer said the decrease reflected the fact that researchers had more time to catch people who became infected. So it doesn't actually represent in this that it is less effective than it used to be. It just never was quite as effective as they thought, but still highly effective. And now to how influential this might be, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, they said polls show about 3 of every 10 unvaccinated people say they would be more likely to get vaccinated with a shot that had been fully approved. And we will see hopefully over the next month or two how effective that actually is. But in terms of how things are going, which I alluded to as the most persuasive part, you can take a look here at the US trends for cases, where we are back up to basically the beginning of the dark winter. We're in Thanksgiving leading into Christmas case numbers. Hospitalizations are reaching their all-time high. So that's fun, not quite there, but getting there, despite again, older people who are more at risk being more vaccinated than the younger population, and deaths still not as bad as they have been, but back up to like March numbers, basically March into April numbers and continuing to rise. So a lot of reasons to potentially get vaccinated. Hopefully, Francesca, people will finally pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, and a lot of reasons to continue to fight for things like Medicare for all, as private insurance companies are stopping coverage of COVID-related hospitalizations or even visits, and look, they're gonna get a dime or $1 billion where they can, and they will. And so, the fallout, long COVID, the effects of COVID, whether or not we're gonna keep on having to get this vaccine, whether or not it'll still be free. These are all things that we need to be watching for and we need to be demanding as we go forward, and we realize that having a robust public health system is in the interest of a healthy nation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which I think would be a good thing to have. I can't speak for everyone. You got your freedoms after all, so why don't we turn to that?
This is it. That's exactly. Sorry. Yeah. Well, let's turn to that. I'm gonna shut up.
No, you're the co-host. If you want to say something, you say it.
No, I'm just saying, like, we've seen people die for their so-called freedoms, and that's what this is. And without the virus, without a pandemic, that was our healthcare system up until this point. It still is, right? That it is my freedom to don't force me to go to a doctor. Don't force me to get Obamacare or whatever it is. It's like I have the freedom to die. Do you? Or do you just not have enough money to treat your symptoms or to go to a doctor regularly? I think it's the latter.
Well, and by the way, let's mention again, as we have before, there are some people who say the reason they haven't gotten vaccinated yet is an inability to get time off. That obviously seems, I don't know what percentage that actually is, but if that's the reason, then that's a thing that the government could help with, and hopefully will.
Hugely, and not only the day that you get the shot, we're talking like, let's get 3 days off to deal with any symptoms should you have any side effects from the vaccine. That's totally right, and thanks for mentioning that for sure.
Okay, well, let's turn briefly to this. Trump had a rally, and generally I don't care, but he did do something I would not have predicted, which is at a rally, like his go time, he sort of encouraged vaccination, and he got a response that maybe we wouldn't predict. Let's take a look.
3 days less than 9 months. And it's great. And you know what? I believe totally in your freedoms. I do. You got to do what you have to do. But I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccines. But no, that's okay. That's all right. You got your freedoms. But I happen to take the vaccine. If it doesn't work, you'll be the first to know, okay? I'll call up Alabama and say, hey, you know what? But it is working. But you do have your freedoms. You have to maintain that. You have to maintain that. And you got to get your kids back to school.
Okay, it's a mixed bag, admittedly. You got it. I took it, and if it doesn't work, well, no, wait, why are you saying it might not work? We know that it works. And then he says, but it does work. Okay, that's good. I'll call up Alabama. No, like, why are you, just say that it works. You know that it works. You took it, just say it, you idiot. But look, there were boos there. I didn't think they were particularly loud, but he responded in real time as if he was affected by them. He does not like being booed. His whole political career is saying things, hearing if they get boos or cheers, and then saying more of the latter and less of the former. That's basically his whole thing. But he said it. He said it at a rally, Francesca. Any chance this helps?
Yeah, he's looking at the dwindling numbers showing up to his rally. He's like, oh my God. Ooh, we got to save these people. Oops, oopsies. But yeah, no, the reason that he's actually talking about the vaccine and the way it works is because he's not actively campaigning right now. You bet your booty that if he were campaigning, it'd be like, no, the vaccine is fascism, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't even matter that you started the program, buddy. You started it, take credit for it. But it is really funny, and this is where you see that even Trump, someone who created the monster that is that mob, that has been these mobs at his rallies, even he, of course, cannot control them. They're beyond him. And instead of trying to, which would be showing leadership, strong, like actual leadership, putting your foot down, what the right does is they pander to that mob. They're afraid of that mob. They're tamed by that mob. They want that mob so bad, and the day that they turn on them, they're like, oh no, they're making t-shirts about me or whatever it is. Like there's a meme about me. Now I've got to be even crazier. Like that's
Am I a cuck?
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is. And so it's actually quite scary to see that Trump kind of backtracks and isn't, and to be honest with you, he's got a great save there. If it doesn't work, you'll be the first to know. It's a good line. That's like actually quite funny. And they have been the first to know. A lot of these unvaccinated and very deep red, very deep MAGA country counties have been the first to know that the vaccine works because they're dying.
Well, I'm glad that what you acknowledged about his relationship with his audience, because I don't think it's like a lot of people think about it. And I don't think that's true just for Trump. Like the right talks so much about alphas and strong guys and stuff that I get why people might be tricked into thinking that they follow alphas. That's not how it works at all. For their politicians and for a lot of grifters in media, they are not leading anyone. They are briefly riding a bucking insane mob and trying while staying on it to pick its pocket of as much money as possible. They're just trying to figure out, what does this crazed group want? What do you want me to say? What will you freak out if I do say? So I'll avoid saying that. That's the model for a lot in media and politicians. Matt Gaetz is not gonna go against the crowd if they suddenly turn on his values or something like that. He's just desperately trying to suck up to them. And Trump is doing that too. He might have at one point led them on some things, but now he is just desperately trying to keep them interested and keep them supporting him. Anyway, with that, enough of him. Let's move on to something even funnier and more pathetic. We know that many on the right don't want to take the actual best thing you can take to stop yourself from getting COVID, which is the vaccine. Now, FDA approved. But they do have things they'll take, and the FDA would really prefer if they would stop doing that. They tweeted over the weekend, "You're not a horse, you are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." And that is the caption for an article about why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. And the reason the FDA has to remind people that they're not bovine is that a lot of people have decided that they don't trust the vaccine because of something with Bill Gates and the CDC, but they do trust sheep dewormer. And so according to an alert issued by the Mississippi Department of Health back on Friday, 70% of all recent calls to poison control in the state have been related to ingestion of livestock or animal formulations of ivermectin purchased at livestock supply centers. Although most callers, 85%, only reported mild symptoms, one person was advised to seek additional treatment. And a Mississippi State Health Officer, Dr. Thomas Dobbs, said, "Animal drugs are highly concentrated for large animals and can be highly toxic in humans. Ivermectin is sometimes used in humans to treat parasites or scabies, but in much smaller doses than are given to livestock." He goes on to say, "You wouldn't get your chemotherapy at a feed store. You wouldn't treat your pneumonia with your animal's medication. It can be dangerous to get the wrong doses of medication, especially with something meant for a horse or a cow." And none of this, Francesca, should be necessary. Not a single bit of this stuff. They don't want to be sheep, and so they treat themselves like sick sheep.
You just stole my line, and I hate you. Like that is exactly right. You're like, we're not gonna be sheeple now. Give me the sheep meds right now. Like, why? What are you doing? I want
them bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's E-I-E-I-O, man. I don't know where we're going with this, but
anyway, yeah, it's look.
And
it's
on
sad.
that farm, there was a crank. Can you imagine? I just love the idea. There's just a lot of like horse eyes, like, what is going on here? Why is this man in my barn? Like, but yeah, it's so sad and like why but this is the thing, they're getting it from Fox, they're getting it from sources they think are legitimate, right? The whole FDA thing, we think that's gonna change their minds maybe, but the Fox News talking point will shift. Yes, it shifts and flows, the ebb of the Fox News talking point. As soon as reality sets in, they just diverge around it. So of course people are taking ivermectin because people are getting sick. They don't know what to do. There hasn't been enough information. And again, back to our robust public healthcare system. It is funny that this is happening, but it's also, if people had doctors they felt they could go to and trust, if people did go see doctors regularly, right? If everyone had that privilege and / the right to do that, do you think we would be seeing the kinds of bogus medicine alternatives that we're seeing now? Of course not.
I hope not.
Of course not.
Look, no, you make a good point, and that actually has shifted my thought a little bit. The thing, because in this case, like Americans, the way they interact with the like insurance and healthcare system it's obviously completely influenced by economic considerations. The fact that we do all these GoFundMes and everything. In this particular case, it is literally freely available and free to get the vaccine. But you're right, they are filtering information through the experience that they've had, which has again been affected by these economic concerns. But that said, I do want to focus on causality here because look, there's a lot of crazy things that people in America believe about a lot of different topics. And it can be hard sometimes to figure out exactly why they believe the things they do. Why do they think that Richard Gere did the thing with the gerbil? I don't know. They read it somewhere. It's complicated. Why do they think that aliens, take you up into their ship and probe you? I don't know. They saw it on X-Files. It's complicated sometimes. Same reasons. And it all has to do with the butt, I'm noticing now. But anyway, it's complicated. In this case, though, it is not complicated to figure out why they believe this very specific thing. I should take ivermectin horse meds for COVID.
Do they take it up the butt though?
I don't want to speak for everyone. There's a debate. Anyway, there's basically two schools of thought. Anyway, no, I want to show you just a little bit from Rachel Maddow's program where she summarized some of the ivermectin talk on Fox News.
We know that our FDA has in many ways failed us by not allowing for the use of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, both of which are used around the world to reduce COVID hospitalizations and deaths.
I pelted them with questions about COVID-19 and the vaccine and therapeutics, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, as well as other proactive treatments and practices were already helping COVID-19 patients all across the country.
On June 5th, Weinstein discussed the benefits of a drug called ivermectin, which can and is around the world used to treat and prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
Okay, so it's very clear. All of the people they trust, including Tucker Carlson, were saying, while they spend month after month telling you like, oh, really suspicious with the vaccine, I don't know, big pharma, don't trust it. Suddenly, big animal pharma, not a thing that you should be concerned about, and just take it. And they lie about it being successfully used. Yes, there had been tests to see if it might help. But so far there is no evidence that it actually does, probably due in no small part to the fact that it is literally not an antiviral medicine. It is for parasites, not for viruses. And so initially they had pointed to this one study that seemed to indicate that it helped. When that study was eventually retracted because of problems with the data, as well as clear plagiarism, suddenly Fox News wasn't interested. Not even interested enough to acknowledge the study they'd been using ended up getting retracted. And I will remind you, these are all hosts that don't want to give medical advice because they're not experts, except when it comes to hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. Then suddenly they're fine encouraging people to look into this more. Any final thoughts?
I mean, the big shame actually, look, I think the Trump administration would have absolutely bungled the rollout of the vaccine and getting it, and it would have been, the numbers would not be what they are now, and they're not good. 51% fully vaccinated. Bad. 60% one shot. It's all bad. But I'm like, there's this little voice in me that's like, what would the talking point have been if Trump were president now? Would they have encouraged the vaccine then? Or would it all have still been, no, let's go with this other hocus pocus BS? Like, I don't know, because at this point I'm like, how do we game out the reverse psychology of Fox News so that we trick them into believing reality? You know?
I don't think they'd be encouraging. Maybe Trump would because he'd want credit, I guess. Right. But Fox likes it too much. And look, they had more incentive to encourage it in 2020 because a stable country would be better for the candidate, that wants to continue ruling it. Now, like they don't feel any pressure politically. I don't think that they would. We would hit
800,000 deaths. We would have hit so many more deaths by now.
I mean, almost certainly. Okay, we are gonna have to take our second break though, but when we come back, what's going on with the infrastructure bill? Are those centrist Democrats gonna be successful in stopping the reconciliation bill? We'll break it down after this. Sorry, you can finish your thought, Francesca.
No, it's fine.
Okay, I apologize. We got that hard timer. Anyway, okay, so with that, let's see. What do we have time for? I think we have time for one story. So let's launch right into this little video.
Joe Biden promised he would build back better, and his infrastructure plan does exactly that, fixing our roads and bridges, making historic investments in clean energy, education, and broadband, expanding Medicare and childcare. But these 9 conservative Democrats are sabotaging Biden's agenda because it would make billionaires and corporations pay their fair share. Tell Representative Gottheimer, stop obstructing President Biden and start working for the American people.
Okay, so that's a fun. You didn't expect that little turn at the end there. So that's a progressive group that's done a 6-figure ad by targeting Gottheimer, who's one of those 9 centrist Democrats. Centrists don't exist. I'm just going to put that out there. I guess it's controversial. It's not actually a thing. He's a conservative Democrat. And they've made versions of those ads targeting people like Henry Cuellar and others to play in their districts to try to put pressure on them to stop standing in the way of Biden's agenda. Now, that said, Francesca, the start of it is like, Biden's the best, he's got plans. And that, I didn't necessarily agree wholly with, but I like the way they're putting pressure on these conservative Democrats from the perspective of, look at them stopping our great president, Joe Biden. What do you think of that as a tactic?
I think it's a great ad. I am a little annoyed that it has to come from the Justice Democrats, right? I think Justice Dems is a progressive organization. They've primaried successfully many conservative Democrats. And it's annoying because what it shows is that other, DCCC groups, other Democratic institutions, lobbying groups, et cetera, that they are not willing to stick their necks out for the president's infrastructure plan like that. Like that they aren't supporting it, that they aren't pushing those conservative Democrats because they support those conservative Democrats and they've, lobbied on their behalf before. So it's sad that it's left to progressives to be the ones to push this through. It's also a sign of how progressive the full infrastructure package is. And I'm talking about not just the infrastructure bill, but of course the reconciliation bill that goes along with it, which I believe is what that ad was also referencing. So it's very cool, but it's also annoying because I'm like, why is that our job? Like, why is that a progressive think tank's job to put up ads like that?
Well, because look, I think one of the reasons I think I'm trying to fight back against the concept of centrists and moderates and all that BS is that it is not a middle point between two extremes. It is its own extreme. It is an extreme defense of a do-nothing status quo that benefits those who are already in positions of economic and political power. Sure. And that is what they are fighting for. Like the fact that progressives need like someone like Biden to have a win sucks, but that's because he's at least trying to do something, which in DC is radical, and they are perfectly happy to stop all of it. Now that said, this group of 9 conservative Democrats apparently are having a few issues. David Dayen of The Prospect says they've learned that several of the 9 conservative House Democrats who insisted in Nancy Pelosi that they would not vote for a budget resolution without a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure package have flipped. They are no longer 9 Dem holdouts. We don't know who. We don't know how many, but that is what David Dayen is reporting. He goes on to say that the situation is very malleable and fluid, but that House progressives' firm support for delaying a vote on the bipartisan bill until the reconciliation one is ready appears to be paying off. Now, there's a few more details. The Washington Post reported just yesterday that some of the 9 sought to negotiate a potential end to the standoff with Democratic leaders, which might indicate that they don't think they can go all the way on this. And very interestingly, this is one of my favorite Pelosi anecdotes for a while. During a House Democratic leadership call last night, she mocked Gottheimer's effort as amateur hour, pledging to push ahead despite his threats to stop the legislation. Pelosi is not, these are the words of Ryan Grimm and his co-author at The Intercept, not known for miscounting votes, suggesting that she is confident that enough of Gottheimer's 8 co-dissenters will not stick with him. She's known to work the phones relentlessly and leaves little to chance.
Yep.
So that's funny, amateur hour, but.
Nancy Pelosi does a few things well, and one of those things is whipping votes. And here's the thing, there was a lot of hand-wringing for, on progressive representatives for why they supported Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Now look what's happening. They've put pressure on Pelosi to say, we're not gonna vote for this reconciliation, for the infrastructure bill unless you also, unless the reconciliation bill passes first, right? That's exactly what they did, and Pelosi is on board. She got on board. These are progressives who supported her for being Speaker of the House, and now she's sticking it to the moderates, so-called moderates, or the conservative Democrats. So it's like there are. This is paying off. We will see if it fully pays off, but it looks like it is. And Nancy Pelosi being on the side of the progressive representatives is a big win, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and we will have to see The process is continuing today, actually, moving forward towards that. We don't know which votes are going to be held. And we have no idea in the end if enough of these conservatives will continue to oppose the deal. We know still that people like Kirsten Sinema were reminding everyone today that they're not going to support the reconciliation bill as it is. So this is far from over. It's going to be one of the main things we talk about over the next few months. But at least as of right now, weirdly, having Nancy Pelosi on our side seems to be good. Anyway, more coming up after this.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.